Hey there, Facebook. Taylor Hemness here from 41 Action News, getting ready to bring you another episode of Faith in KC, episode 5 today. I'm sitting here in the 41 Action News studio that looks very different than what you see on television. This is what it looks like when all the lights are out, because it basically becomes this kind of stark background instead of the bright blue that you're used to, or red in some cases. See, that's the camera situation. This is where I sit normally. I do have a live audience today. Meteorologist Jeff Pinner working away over there, getting ready for 41 Action News midday as we get ready to interview, or get ready to prepare for that show today. So I wanted to come here for this kind of behind the scenes look, because I wanted to deconstruct a little bit the style of these videos. If this is the first one you've watched, or we talked about it a little bit in the very first episode a few weeks back. These are long form interviews. And if you watched last week, very long form. Last week's episode with Alvin Brooks was almost an hour, and I loved talking to him. But I want these to be, and we want these to be, as kind of natural as we can make them, and we don't want to edit a whole lot and cut things out, because we want it to be an honest and open and frank conversation, and we don't want you to feel like, oh, I wonder what was missing there or that, because you're smart. Viewers know when things have been cut out or tweaked or a little bit, and we don't want that. Not trying to hide anything by any means. We just want to be able to have open conversations. And I tell all the people I interview for these episodes, hey, if I ask you a question that you don't know or you don't want to talk about, say that. My style as an interviewer is kind of free-flowing, as you may have noticed. I don't necessarily write down a lot of questions very often. I had one of the people that was on Faith in KC earlier on asked me to send some questions, and I said, I'm not going to really write down questions for these. Every now and then when I do interviews for news especially, I will write things down. I did an interview this morning in which I wrote down half a dozen questions or so to ask the person, because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything. But for these, it's more of I've chosen the person that I'm going to talk to, and based on that choice, it's going to direct the interview a good deal. And I just kind of go from there. There are things that I want to ask them that I don't know. There are things that I want to ask them that I really want to get their opinion on, or hear what they have to say about it, where maybe I have an opinion about it and I want to compare it. But I want that to be kind of a free-flowing conversation. And I also want to know if you have thoughts about that. These are open for comments and critiques as always. And if you have questions that you'd like me to ask the next time, or maybe, hey, don't ask this way, or I can't believe you asked this question this way. It's not often that you, as a viewer, get to hear the whole interview. Obviously, when we're doing a news story, you don't hear the whole interview. The way the reporter asked the question, the way it's answered, the way the back and forth happens sometimes. And I think that's what's cool about these episodes as well. So, but if you have thoughts about, if you can't believe I asked a certain question, please tell me. Comment on Facebook, reach out to me, taylor.hemness@kshb.com. And as always, you can reach out to me on social media too. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. Reach out to me there as well. I love interviewing people, especially that know a lot more than I do, which is a long list of people. Most people are smarter than me. And that's the case again today. Today's guest is a professor with a background in history and religion at UMKC. We had a professor from St. Paul's a couple of weeks ago, but this is a more secular look at some of the conversations we're having. So I hope you enjoy that today. As always, if you have questions or thoughts, please let me know. Share this video, tell others about it, and I hope you're enjoying Faith in KC. Well, hello, welcome to another edition of Faith in KC here from 41 Action News. I'm 41 Action News anchor Taylor Hemness from 41 Action News Today on the morning show every weekday, and hopefully you get a chance to watch that. We'd love to have you join us in the mornings, but this is a different format that we're trying now with this new series of conversations that I'm so glad to be a part of, called Faith in KC. We're putting these out on Facebook and hoping that you will respond however you feel is appropriate. Obviously, we always want to hear what you're thinking. We want to hear what you have to say about what we're producing content-wise. So if you have thoughts, questions, comments, please let us know in the comments. Please keep it civil. There's some serious conversations we're going to have here, but we look forward to hearing what you have to say. For this edition today, I'm really excited to be joined by Dr. Gary Ebersole from UMKC in the history department there at UMKC. Dr. Ebersole, I'm glad to have you with me today. I was looking, you're my first from the academic realm to join me for this. I've had a rabbi that I've spoken to, a journalist that I've spoken to, but you're my first from the academic realm, and I'm glad to have you with us today.
Well, it's nice to be with you. Do you know George Bernard Shaw?
I know that I'm
19th century playwright. He famously said, "Those that can do, those that can't teach." So I teach religion.
First, before we get too far into it, if you would just, you don't have to give me the full CV, but tell me about your courses that you've taught at UMKC and your background there.
Okay. I did my MA and PhD at the Divinity School of the University of Chicago. Then taught at Grinnell College, 1981 to 83. Moved to Ohio State to start the religious studies program there. Then was called back to the University of Chicago on the faculty in 1990. And I came to UMKC in 1996 to start the program here.
Are you still teaching? Are you retired now or semi-retired? What are you
I just retired last year, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, congratulations on that.
I had great plans to travel. That didn't work out so well.
Here's my first question that I'm curious about. What is it like to be a member of the history department and teaching history, religion, all that in the middle of history that we're living? I think now at this point we feel confident. I mean, the fact that we're readily comparing this to something that happened in 1918 now, this has become a moment in history. What is it like to experience this as a moment in history with your background?
Well, I always told my students, that history happens. And we attempt to reconstruct the past as best as we can, but it's the question of, for me, it's always about why are you interested in the past? And for me, I'm not only interested in the life of people in the past. I'm very fascinated, with how people made sense of the world, how they constructed moral lives for themselves. But also what the past can tell us about our present. And I think that's where you were going. A pandemic of the sort we have right now is nothing new in human history. Disease has shaped human history in all kinds of ways. For example, when Europeans came to the New World, new only in the sense that Europeans weren't aware of the civilizations and peoples who lived here, they brought with them European diseases, including things that had been domesticated like measles, which devastated the Native American population. So 90% of the indigenous peoples, succumb to disease within a matter of decades. And
I think most people are familiar with the phrase, those that don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. And even with that being in mind, I think that the idea of a pandemic, in whatever scale, this or any other, I think the idea of a pandemic felt more like the plot of a book or a movie to most people in my generation, at least. We were familiar with the idea that it could happen, but that's the kind of thing that happens in a plot, in a movie somewhere.
Yeah, we forget.
But to your point, it's not. This is something that the world has seen.
We forget, I think, too often how different our world is, because germ theory, the idea that it's germs and viruses that cause disease, came about in the modern period. When Shakespeare was writing, it was still Galenic medicine that goes back to the ancient Greeks. So modern medicine really, and public health only comes into existence in a serious way in the 19th century. And then with the discovery of vaccines, we have, in fact, created a kind of fence that protects us from the devastation that disease used to wreak upon peoples, and, you know, as I said, destroy civilizations. The Aztec Empire fell because of the incapacitation that was caused by the disease that the Spanish had brought with them. Not that the Spanish were that militarily superior or anything of that sort. It was disease that brought down a great, powerful civilization. So, yeah, we live in a very different world where we've come to expect that we can protect ourselves by getting an annual shot or two. And that's very, very different than what it used to be.
I think, you know, this is the part where I know we may get some strong comments. And again, if you want to comment about anything you're hearing here, please let us know what you have to say as you watch this. But what you said there made me think of the idea of almost taking for granted when I take my kids to go get shots before school starts in a normal situation. I mean, that's a direct result of trying to make sure that things don't absolutely spread like a wildfire all over the place. And obviously there are strong opinions about vaccinations with kids and that kind of thing. But for those that choose to do
vaccinations for measles and smallpox, these are 20th century developments that, yeah, I mean, our historical memory is very short.
So as I talked about, whenever I reached out to you to be here with me to join this this is a conversation about faith, or a series of conversations about faith and religion and spirituality. What can you tell us? Obviously, there's lots to unpack, but tell me about some instances in history where the church has had to respond to something like this. And when I say the church, that's probably unfair for this. Any faith example that you know of, where a group of believers have had to respond to something like this. What's it been like?
Right. Well, if we can just put church in scare quotes, you know, and use it as a kind of generic to cover what the Buddhists, for example, would call the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns. Not a church, but an ecclesiastical group of specialists, people who dedicate themselves to religion, that sort of thing. I mean, religious communities have responded to pandemics in very, very different sorts of ways, and tried to explain them away very differently. So if you look at the ancient Indian religions like Hinduism and Buddhism, they have a theory of karma, that everything happens because of prior actions, and that there's positive and negative karma, and the disease would be caused by negative karma. The ancient Greeks myths talk about, you know, the gods sending disease, and we can see that in the Hebrew Bible as well, right? That Yahweh sends the plague.
Sure.
Others have taken the position that things happen and they're not always caused by the deity or deities, but that events like a pandemic function within a larger cosmic or universal divine plan of some sort.
Yeah.
So there's a whole range of ways that they've responded. We know that in the medieval period, when you had the plague waves of the Black Death and so on, that religious communities played a very important role in nursing and caring for the ill. But we also know that leper colonies were established, and people who had become ill would be isolated from the community. In one sense, it makes good public sense, but in another way, it really alienated those individuals and in horrible sorts of ways, so that all too often they would have died alone and by the side of a highway,
Yeah.
not being cared for.
Thanks to Dr. Fauci and his references to it on a regular basis, Dr. Anthony Fauci in Washington, he was talked a lot about. He has talked a lot about, and people have referenced him being around when the AIDS epidemic broke out in the 1980s and
Yes.
that era. I'm gonna, Gary, I'm gonna guess you're a year or two older than me. That's all I'm gonna guess is a year or two difference in our.
I'm 70.
But I think that you were probably a little bit more aware of what was happening in the world in the 1980s than I was. Was there a religious response to AIDS? I mean, I've heard things about God's response to homosexuality, for example. We've heard things about that. What was the response of religion to AIDS when it became what it is or what it was?
Again, it's across the spectrum. You have what I'm, if I might be permitted, would call the Mother Teresa sort of religious response. Mother Teresa spent her life in Calcutta dealing with lepers and other horrible diseases. So that's one kind of religious response. When I came to Kansas City, the AIDS epidemic was on and the cure had not been found yet. It was shocking to find that many of the local churches refused to conduct services, memorial services for AIDS victims. So I'm on the board of trustees of Pilgrim Chapel on Gillum Road in Midtown, not far from your studios. And we performed, memorial rites, non-denominational rights. So that was a different response, but if you go back into the news archives, you will see some religious leaders talking about AIDS being sent as punishment by God for everything from same-sex relationships to abortion to who knows what. Those are the two different sides of the spectrum.
The church response to this has been interesting on a lot of levels here. One, because of just the doing business aspect of a church, the ability to be open, to pay their staffs. Obviously, larger churches have lots of people working for them. The ability to have their congregations come. I'm an active member of a church, and I've missed being able to go. My church is still not allowing people in, and I've missed being able to go and see people and take part and not have.
And it depends on your socioeconomic status and whether your neighborhood has internet access or not. Whether you're able to have an online Sunday service, let's say, or a Saturday service, whatever the case may be. For people with not a lot of means, they're even more isolated. But I can tell you that in times of stress, people often turn inward, and you find things like the New Testament phrase, wherever two or three are gathered in my name.
Sure.
Right? That is the church, right? And so you have essentially families having home church as well.
Sure.
Where normally, you would go to church or Wednesday evening prayer meeting or whatever the case may be. Now it's going back to an older 19th century family-based model in some cases.
I don't mind saying my church on Sunday morning right now is every Sunday morning. I have three sons, and my wife and three sons, and I sit on the couch and we watch a video that's produced by my church specifically for the boys. My wife and I take communion together. We pray. We we sing a little bit, we recite Bible verses, and we talk about what we're doing with the boys. But that has become church now for us for 5 plus, almost 6 months, I guess. My question to you coming out of that is, we've talked a lot on the newscast. I talk about it every morning about how Industry X is going to respond or is responding to this. What do you see as the immediate future of churches? Say we're able to get a vaccine in the next half a year, and we're able to get back to some sense of at least going back in large numbers and that kind of thing in the next 5 or 6 months or less, I hope. What do you see as the immediate future of places of worship? Will it be a sense of, let's get back to what we were doing? Will it be a renewed sense of, gosh, we need to reach out to more people we're not doing? What do you think?
I mean, we've been pushed to an online existence. I myself, have Mennonite and Amish relatives, and they're not always technologically up to date, let's say, right? No electricity, but those are conscious choices, But I've been pushed to have meetings, a board meeting, for example, we hold by Zoom, so, but I think that eventually the personal contact aspect will lead to large gatherings. Once again, the community coming together in the synagogue, in the mosque. For Muslims, gathering for prayers, collectively doing that is so central, so important that it will happen again. In a secular parallel, college students and junior, senior high school students who are facing virtual education, you can learn arithmetic online, but that's not everything that an education involves. The interpersonal relationships and developing them, the laying on of hands in some churches, right? That's skin on skin. That's still central to so many traditions that I don't think we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be all isolated together forever.
Right.
But,
I hope not.
Yeah. In a strange sort of way, though, I think, that as people, if we can return to a new sort of normalcy, this pandemic has at least taught a lot of us that there is this broader community of humanity out there, and we're all in it together, that this is one world in that sense. And what happens in Wuhan, China, does affect us here in Kansas City, and vice versa.
Sure.
Right? There's a good reason why American passports aren't very effective right now, right? You can't travel. I've canceled 3 overseas trips in the last 5 months.
Wow.
Yeah. Because you simply can't get in, whether it's Japan or Europe or wherever. Because right now we're the carriers.
Right. We've become the hotspot at this point.
Yeah.
So many.
And that, I think, if we can get our arms around that one, it will hopefully help us to break away from demonizing other people.
Sure.
Naming the COVID, the Chinese virus, is not helpful. Every disease emerges somewhere and gets noticed. It's not where it actually originated, it's where it's first noticed by medical professionals, and then the name gets stuck to it. But we've seen discrimination of that
Absolutely.
sort throughout human history, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can an event like this change fundamentally the way a church, or even in a larger scale, an organized religion operates? Are there examples in history of something that is not necessarily from a text, let's say, like so many of our
Mm-hmm.
organized religions are based from, or get their beginnings from? Can you think of a possibility where, or an instance where a world event has affected a large congregation or a large religion anyway?
Mm. But as I think about European history, and European history writ large is also the history of the Europeans in the New World, there you often had prohibition on religious practices, not as a
Yeah.
result of disease, but uh, the practice of Judaism, or the practice of Christianity in a Muslim uh, country, and so on, happen. And there you see people going underground. They
Yeah.
continued to practice, but without the ecclesiastical structures that they were used to. In Japan, when Christianity was banned at the turn of the 17th century, you had a group called Kakure Christians in Kyushu and southern Japan. These are hidden Christians who remained practitioners. Uh, they had been converted and were Catholics, but they re-emerged in the late 19th century. And by that time, their Bible was different, their rituals were different, because lay communities had to try to remember what the priests had done and what they had taught. And without ready access to their sacred scriptures, they were working on collective oral memory, which is good as far as it goes, but not perfect, right? And so in those ways, yes, religious communities changed dramatically when they reemerged uh, in all kinds of ways. It was startling to see how what had been Christian had morphed into a different kind of still vibrant community. So,
All right, this last thing I want to ask you about is kind of an odd one, but I hope you'll follow with me here.
mm-hmm.
Are we any more or less capable as a people, just as a country? We'll start there, and if you want to expand, please feel free. Are we any more or less capable of observing our own history than we used to be? Like that first thing that I asked you about is that responding to history, and
Mm-hmm.
the history if we don't pay attention to repeat itself, that kind of thing. Are we any more or less capable of realizing history as we're living it, and our obligation, for lack of a better word, to respond to it?
That's a difficult question, but it's actually a very important question. The first thing I would want to say to you and your listeners is that history as it is remembered is inevitably political.
Sure.
It's a factional perspective, as it were.
Written by the winners, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. History written by the winners or by the dominant community and so forth. And so in the United States, we are continually wrestling, and it's not going to ever disappear, with how do we teach American history, right? Are we being honest when we say Columbus discovered America, right? Well, if you're going to take a narrow European focus, yes, he's one of the first Europeans to find land over on this side of the Atlantic, but that ignores the history of the peoples who were already here and had been here for thousands of years.
Sure.
And so it's a question of collectively coming together. I mean, I'm very fascinated and encouraged by the way that the visual of the death of George Floyd, right, has led to public demonstrations, public demands for rewriting
Sure.
Recent history, right?
Tearing down
rewriting
statues.
the characterizations of people of color, right? Thinking about institutional racism is to push you to rewrite or rethink history, including the history we're living through, right? So, but at the same time, we've also seen that the electronic revolution, the computer revolution, the internet has led to such a diversity and ready availability of reliable and totally unreliable histories out there, right? So we have reworked anti-Semitic conspiracies online, right?
Yeah.
If you're a historian, the resonances with what was going on in medieval Europe, you know, are all too real and scary. But that's out there as a possibility for people at this point. So I guess I would say it's the possibility to rewrite history, to rethink history, and the meaning of our past is with us. We have that possibility, but how do we do it collectively in a way that doesn't violate, doesn't silence, doesn't marginalize others is the nub of the problem we have.
Absolutely.
But we have to work at it. And you in the media play a central role for us in that, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So we're thankful to have professionals in the media, right?
Well, that's you just put even more pressure on me that I already feel. So I appreciate it as a way.
That's what you need.
Dr. Gary Ebersole, thank you so much for your time today. I found you on the UMKC website. If people watch this, have questions for you or things they'd like to ask, there's still a way to reach you through the UMKC website, possibly an email. Is that right?
Yeah, email is the easiest way. When I'm writing, you know, I don't like to be interrupted with the phone. So email I can answer at my convenience. And that's Ebersole, my last name, Ebersole, G, first initial of my first name, and then at umkc.edu.
Perfect. Dr. Ebersole, seriously, thank you for your time today, for your knowledge, for your candor. I appreciate you spending some time with me.
Best of luck. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Stay healthy.